The diplomatic quarters of Kepler-7 station buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of worlds gathered for the weekly trade negotiations. Dr. Lee Min-ho straightened his blue Earth delegation uniform and checked his datapad one more time. The cultural exchange meeting was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes, and he wanted everything to go smoothly. Min-ho had been stationed on Kepler-7 for almost 2 years now, one of only 12 humans serving as diplomats across the entire galaxy. It was lonely work, but important. Humanity had joined the Galactic Confederation just 5 years ago, and they were still proving themselves worthy of membership among the ancient alien civilizations. The main hall filled with the usual mixture of strange languages and mechanical translator voices. Min-ho recognized most of the regular attendees by now. The peaceful Altarians with their large eyes and gentle movements, the scholarly Centauri with their flowing robes, the insectoid Krell who communicated through clicking sounds, and, in the far corner, taking up more space than necessary, the Vorthan delegation. The Vorthans were impossible to ignore. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, their reptilian bodies were covered in thick scales that bore the scars of countless battles. Their yellow eyes seemed to look right through other species, as if measuring their worth for conquest. The Vorthan Empire controlled over 200 worlds through pure military might, and they never let anyone forget it. Min-ho was reviewing his notes when he heard crying. A small family of Altarians had entered the hall, their belongings stuffed into worn travel bags. The parents looked exhausted, and their young daughter clung to her mother's leg with obvious fear. Min-ho recognized them from the refugee processing reports. Their homeworld had been caught in a border dispute between the Vorthans and another species. The family approached the human delegation table hesitantly. The father, speaking through his translator device, asked in broken galactic standard, "Please, honored diplomat, we seek protection for family. Vorthans claim our world now. We have nowhere else." Min-ho stood up with a gentle smile. "Of course. Let me get you the proper asylum forms. The Confederation has clear laws about refugee protection." Before he could reach for his files, a massive shadow fell across their table. Commander Thekvar of the Vortan delegation loomed over them, his scarred face twisted in disgust. The commander's reputation preceded him. He had personally led the conquest of 17 worlds and was known for his hatred of what he called inferior species. "These vermin belong to the Empire now," Thekvar announced in his harsh, clicking language. His translator made his words sound even more threatening. "Their world has been claimed through legitimate military action. They will return to serve their new masters." The Altarian child whimpered and pressed closer to her parents. Min-ho stepped forward, keeping his voice calm and diplomatic. "Commander, with respect, the Galactic Confederation recognizes their refugee status. Article 7 of the Confederation. Charter clearly states that civilian populations fleeing military occupation have the right to seek sanctuary." Thekvar's laugh sounded like grinding metal. "Rights? You speak of rights, primitive? Your species has been in space for barely a century. The Empire has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. We decide who has rights. Other delegates in the hall had stopped their conversations to watch the confrontation. Min-ho could feel their eyes on him, measuring how humanity would respond to this challenge. This was exactly the kind of situation his diplomatic training had prepared him for. "Commander, we're all members of the Confederation here," Min-ho said carefully. "The laws apply to everyone equally, regardless of military strength or age of civilization." Thekvar took a step closer, his massive form towering over the human diplomat. "Perhaps you need a lesson in proper galactic order, little primitive. Some species exist to serve their betters. Others exist only until their betters grow tired of them." The threat was clear. Min-ho felt his pulse quicken, but he maintained his diplomatic composure. Behind him, the Altarian family trembled with fear. The little girl had started crying again, her soft sobs filling the sudden silence in the hall. Thekvar pulled out his plasma weapon, a sleek device that could reduce a person to ash in seconds. He aimed it casually at the Altarian parents. "These creatures will return to their world and accept their fate. Any who interfere will learn why the galaxy fears the Vorthan Empire." Min-ho looked around the hall desperately. Dozens of alien diplomats watched, but none moved to help. They all feared the Vorthans too much to risk confrontation. The security station was empty. The automated systems would not respond fast enough. The commander's finger moved toward the firing stud. The little Altarian girl looked up at Minho with huge, terrified eyes. Minho did not think. He simply moved. He stepped directly between Thekvar and the family, spreading his arms wide to shield them. "Stop. If you want to hurt them, you'll have to go through me first." Thekvar's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with rage. "Foolish primitive, so be it." The plasma discharge lit up the chamber like a miniature sun. The energy bolt struck Minho square in the chest, burning through his uniform and flesh in an instant. He collapsed to the deck, smoke rising from the fatal wound. The last thing Dr. Lee Minho saw was the little Altarian girl's face, no longer looking at him with fear, but with something else. Gratitude, hope, the knowledge that someone had cared. Enough to die for strangers. Commander Thekvar holstered his weapon with casual indifference, stepping over the human's body. Let this be a lesson to all primitives who forget their place. But in that moment something changed in the galaxy. Humanity had lost their gentlest representative, their bridge builder, their symbol of peaceful cooperation. What they would become in response, none of the watching aliens could imagine. The silence that followed would soon become the most dangerous sound the Vorthan Empire had ever heard. The news reached Earth exactly 12 hours and 17 minutes after Dr. Lee Minho died on Kepler 7 station. The encrypted message arrived at the presidential palace in Seoul, where President Kim Da-eun was reviewing trade agreements with the Centauri coalition. Her assistant handed her the priority communication with shaking hands. Kim Da-eun read the report 3 times before the words truly sank in. The first human killed in galactic space, not in an accident or natural disaster, but murdered in cold blood while protecting innocent refugees. She set the datapad down carefully and stared out the window at the city lights below. Within 6 hours, every human government leader had received the same report. Emergency sessions convened in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi, and dozens of other capitals. The video conferences stretched deep into the night as humanity's leaders absorbed the reality of what had happened. The killer was Commander Thekvar of the Vorthan Empire. The victim was their peaceful diplomat, a man who had dedicated his life to building friendship between species. The witnesses were dozens of alien representatives who had watched it happen and done nothing, but it was the aftermath that truly shocked them. The Galactic Confederation's response arrived 2 days later in the form of a standard diplomatic note. Ambassador Veltar of the Centauri Coalition expressed sincere regrets for the unfortunate incident and assured Earth that a full investigation would begin within 2 galactic cycles. In human terms, that meant 18 months of bureaucratic delays. The Vorthan Empire's official statement was even worse. Their Ministry of War claimed that Commander Thekvar had acted within established military protocols when confronted by an aggressive, unknown entity attempting to interfere with lawful imperial operations. They regretted any misunderstanding regarding proper diplomatic procedures, but accepted no responsibility for the death. President Kim Da-eun called an emergency meeting of the Human Colonial Council. Representatives from Mars, Luna, the asteroid colonies and the outer system settlements gathered via hologram in the secure conference room beneath Seoul. "They killed our diplomat," she said simply. "They murdered him for protecting refugees, and now they pretend it was justified." Governor Chen Wei-ming of Mars Colony spoke first. "What are our options through official channels?" "None that matter," replied Admiral Park Hyun-woo from Lunar Command. "The Confederation moves slowly. By the time they finish investigating, the Vorthans will have conquered 3 more worlds. And if we demand justice directly from the Empire," asked Director Yoon Se-ra from the Belt Mining Consortium, "they'll laugh at us," Admiral Park said grimly. "To them, we're primitives who've been in space for barely a century. They don't fear us, they don't respect us. And now they think they can kill us without consequences." The discussion continued for hours, but the conclusion was already clear. Humanity faced a choice that would define their place in the galaxy forever. They could accept the insult, work through proper channels, and hope for justice that might never come. or they could respond in a way that would change everything. President Kim Da-eun made the decision that night. Send the activation codes to all colonial governments. I want unanimous approval within 72 hours. The codes had not been transmitted in over 300 years, not since the Unification Wars had nearly destroyed Earth. They authorized the awakening of humanity's true military power, the sleeping giant that had been deliberately hidden from galactic view. What followed was a silence that stretched across human space like a held breath. Every human embassy in Confederation space went dark simultaneously. Diplomatic staff began packing their belongings without explanation. Trade negotiations were quietly cancelled. Cultural exchange programs shut down overnight. The constant chatter of human communications across the galaxy simply stopped. Ambassador. Veltar tried calling the human embassy on Centauri Prime 6 times before realizing no one would answer. The Altarian refugees who had witnessed Dr. Lee's death found their asylum applications forwarded to other species' embassies. Human merchant ships began disappearing from shipping lanes, their crews returning to home ports without explanation. Alien governments assumed humanity was simply grieving. Some species had withdrawn from galactic affairs for decades after suffering major losses. The Krell had once gone silent for 50 years after a plague devastated their homeworld. The Centauri had isolated themselves for an entire century following a civil war. Commander Thekvar received reports of the human withdrawal with satisfaction. "See how these primitives cower," he told his officers. "One show of strength and they retreat like frightened animals. Perhaps now they understand their proper place in the galactic order." The Vorthan Empire, emboldened by what they saw as human weakness, began expanding their territorial claims. 3 more worlds fell under Imperial control within the month. Border disputes that had been stable for years suddenly flared into violence as the Vorthans pressed their advantages. But while the galaxy saw only silence from human space, something very different was happening in the Outer Rim territories, where few alien ships ever traveled. Deep space monitoring stations that had been marked as decommissioned in official records suddenly blazed with activity. Massive industrial complexes on airless moons began drawing power from fusion reactors that had supposedly been shut down centuries ago. Ancient shipyards orbiting forgotten asteroids started transmitting construction schedules that made no sense to anyone monitoring Confederation communication networks. On Luna, in a bunker that officially did not exist, Admiral Park Hyun-woo watched as status reports flooded in from across human space. The Terra Defense Fleet was awakening after 3 centuries of sleep. Weapons that had been designed to fight other humans were being upgraded with technology, learned from peaceful contact with alien civilizations. The message from Earth's government was simple and signed by every world leader in human space. They killed one of ours while he protected innocents. Honor his sacrifice, make them understand the price of such actions. Admiral Park sealed the orders in his personal safe and began the process that would remind the galaxy why humanity had once been called the most dangerous species in known space. The silence would not last much longer. In 6 weeks, the Vorthan Empire would learn the difference between human diplomacy and human war. 3 months after Dr. Lee Min-ho died protecting refugees, strange things began happening in the quiet corners of human space. Deep space sensors across the galaxy picked up energy readings that made no sense. Massive power signatures were coming from areas that should have been empty. On the monitoring station orbiting Proxima Centauri, technician Velkara stared at her readings in confusion. The computer showed enormous energy spikes coming from the human colony systems, but according to Confederation records, humans only had basic fusion reactors and simple manufacturing plants. "These numbers cannot be correct," she muttered, running the diagnostics again. The readings were accurate. Something was waking up in human territory. On Luna, Commander Choi Soo-jin walked through corridors that had been sealed for 300 years. Emergency lighting flickered on as her footsteps echoed through the abandoned sections of the moonbase. Behind massive blast doors marked with radiation warnings and military codes, ancient machinery hummed back to life. The construction base stretched for kilometers beneath the lunar surface. Su Jin had studied the historical records, but seeing, the reality was different. These were not the simple shipyards that built human colony vessels and trading ships. These were military production facilities designed during humanity's darkest period, when Earth's nations had fought wars that nearly destroyed their entire species. Massive robotic arms began moving with practiced precision, assembling hull sections from materials that did not appear in any Confederation database. The ships taking shape were nothing like the peaceful vessels humans had shown to their alien neighbors. These were predators, built for one purpose only. Status report. Su Jin called to her engineering team. Bay 7 through 12 are fully operational, reported Chief Engineer Park Dong-woo. We can begin launching vessels within 48 hours. Su Jin nodded grimly. The Terra Defense Fleet was awakening after centuries of sleep, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. On Mars, similar scenes played out in underground facilities that had been disguised as mining operations. Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood in the command center of what Confederation records listed as a mineral extraction complex. In reality, it was the primary coordination hub for humanity's true military forces. The wall displays showed status updates from across human space. 147 vessels under construction. Weapons systems that had been theoretical during the Unification Wars were now being installed with modern technology. Stealth systems that could make entire fleets invisible to alien sensors. "Sir," called Lieutenant Jang Bo-ram from her station, "we're receiving final authorization codes from Earth." Admiral Park looked at the message that appeared on his personal screen. It was signed by every world leader, every colonial governor, every human authority in space. The words were simple but carried the weight of their entire species. One of ours died protecting strangers. They called him primitive and killed him like an animal. Show them what primitives can do when they choose war over peace. Park closed, his eyes for a moment, remembering his grandfather's stories about the Unification Wars. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself in those conflicts, learning lessons about warfare that no other species had ever needed to learn. When they finally achieved peace, they had hidden those weapons and sworn never to use them again. But that was when they only fought each other. Now someone had murdered their diplomat and called them weak. "Signal all battle groups," Park commanded. "Operation Righteous Fury is now active." The orders went out across human space in code that had not been used for 3 centuries. On colony worlds, reserve officers who had spent decades as teachers and farmers suddenly received activation notices. In asteroid mining stations, equipment, operators discovered that their mining lasers were actually military-grade weapons in disguise. The transformation was not just technological, but psychological. Humans had spent generations learning to be peaceful, diplomatic, cooperative. Dr. Lee Min-ho had represented everything they aspired to become. But his death had awakened something else, something older and more dangerous. Captain Yun Sai-ra received her orders while commanding what appeared to be a simple cargo hauler near the Jupiter system. Within hours, the disguised hull panels had fallen away to reveal the sleek predator beneath. The TDF Busan was not a cargo ship at all, but a stealth destroyer that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Her crew moved with efficiency that surprised even her. These men and women had trained for this moment their entire lives, even though they had hoped it would never come. The peaceful facade they had shown the galaxy was real, but it was not their only face. "Ma'am," called her weapons officer, "all systems are green, we're ready for combat operations." Sai-ra looked at the tactical display showing Vorthan patrol routes. The aliens had no idea that every movement of their fleets was being tracked by sensors they could not detect. They thought humans were hiding in fear, licking their wounds after the humiliation on Kepler 7 station. They were about to learn the difference between human diplomacy and human war. Across the galaxy, alien governments continued their normal routines. The Confederation Senate debated trade regulations. The Vorthan Empire planned new conquests. The peaceful species that had witnessed Dr. Lee's death tried to forget what they had seen. None of them noticed the shadows gathering in deep space, or the ancient weapons being loaded into ships that officially did not exist. Humanity's 3-month silence was about to end in a way that would change the galaxy forever. The first Vorthan patrol to encounter humanity's true nature would never make it home to report what they had found. Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the TDF Incheon, humanity's first dreadnought to leave dock in 300 years. Around him, officers prepared for the kind of warfare their species had hoped never to fight again. "All ships report ready, sir," his communications officer announced. Park nodded once. "Then let us remind the galaxy why our ancestors feared thee. A dark between the stars, begin the hunt." The Vorthan border fleet disappeared on a Tuesday. 47 warships had been patrolling the outer edges of Imperial space, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. They transmitted their regular status reports at 0800 Imperial Standard Time, confirming all systems operational and patrol routes secure. At 8:01, they simply stopped existing. Commander Thekva received the first missing ship report in his command center on Vorthan Prime. His communications officer, a nervous young soldier named Zek Thal, approached his desk with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we've lost contact with Patrol Group 7 Alpha," Zek Thal reported. They missed their scheduled check-in. Thekvar barely looked up from his tactical reports. "Equipment failure. Have them switch to backup communications." "Sir, we've tried all frequencies. No response from any of the 12 ships in that group." This got Thekvar's attention. He turned his scarred face toward the communications station, yellow eyes narrowing. "Send a search patrol to their last known position." The search ships found nothing. No debris fields, no energy signatures, no distress beacons. The space where 47 Vorthan warships had been patrolling was completely empty, as if they had never existed at all. Within 6 hours, 3 more patrol groups went silent. Then 5 more. Each time, the search teams found the same thing. Empty space where Imperial ships should have been. Panic began spreading through Vorthan Command. Their navy was the most powerful force in the galaxy, equipped with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the fire of entire fleets. What could make such ships disappear without even sending a distress signal? The answer came 3 days later, when the defense platforms orbiting Kethmore, a major Vorthan colony world, detected massive hyperspace signatures approaching the system. The automated defense grid activated, charging weapons that could destroy incoming asteroids or enemy fleets. Captain Yoon Se-ra emerged from hyperspace aboard the TDF Busan with 11 other human vessels. The ships that materialized were unlike anything in Confederation records. Their hulls were matte black, seeming to absorb the light from Kethmore's sun. No running lights marked their positions. No identification signals announced their presence. The Vorthan defenders reacted with practiced efficiency. Hundreds of fighters launched from orbital platforms. Missile batteries fired spreads that could level cities. Plasma cannons designed to destroy capital ships concentrated their fire on the approaching human fleet. The human ships moved like ghosts through the barrage. Their hulls flowed around incoming fire as if the weapons were passing through empty space. Point defense systems created walls of deadly precision, intercepting every missile and plasma bolt before they could strike. When the humans finally returned fire, the results were terrifying. Defense platform Keth 7, a massive station that had protected the colony for 2 centuries, simply vanished. One moment it was there, its shields blazing with defensive fire. The next moment it was gone, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. The pattern repeated across the system. Every military installation, every orbital weapon, every Vorthan warship was systematically destroyed with surgical precision. But the civilian stations, the colony cities, the merchant vessels were left completely untouched. The message was clear: this was not conquest. This was extermination of military threats. Within 6 hours, the Kethmore system was secure. The human fleet vanished back into hyperspace as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind a colony world stripped of all military protection but otherwise unharmed. News of the attack spread across Vorthan space like wildfire. Commanders who had spent their careers conquering other species suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand. The humans had revealed technology that made Vorthan weapons look primitive, stealth systems that rendered entire Fleets invisible. Weapons that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. Most terrifying of all, tactical coordination that spoke of centuries of warfare experience. Admiral Park Hyun-woo coordinated the assault from his command ship, watching as status reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human battle groups were striking simultaneously at dozens of Vorthan positions. Each attack followed the same pattern: complete destruction of military assets, careful protection of civilian populations. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 3 Vorthan commanders," reported his communications officer. Park's expression remained cold. "Ignore them. We are not here to accept surrender. We are here to remove a threat." The Galactic Confederation watched in stunned horror as reports reached their monitoring stations. The primitive humans who had seemed so peaceful were systematically dismantling the galaxy's most feared military power. Ships that had been disguised as simple cargo haulers revealed themselves as advanced warships. Industrial complexes that appeared to be mining operations were actually massive weapons factories. Ambassador Veltar stood in the Confederation Senate, reading reports that seemed impossible. "How did we miss this? How did an entire species hide such military capability?" The answer was becoming clear. Humanity had deliberately concealed their true nature for decades. The inefficient drives that seemed outdated were actually stealth systems. The small fleet size had been a choice, not a limitation. The peaceful diplomacy they had practiced was not weakness but wisdom from a species that understood exactly what they were capable of when peace failed. On Vorthan Prime, Commander Thekvar watched his empire crumble in real time. The alien who had murdered Dr. Lee Min-ho because he thought humans were weak now faced the reality of what he had awakened. For the first time in his career of conquest, he felt genuine fear. The human fleets were coming and there was nowhere left to run. The siege of Vorthan Prime lasted exactly 18 minutes. Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the TDF, Incheon as his fleet emerged from hyperspace around the Vorthan homeworld. 57 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their black hulls casting shadows across the planet's surface. The capital city's defense grid activated immediately, but the weapons that had protected the Empire for millennia seemed pitiful against humanity's revealed might. Commander Thekvar watched from his fortress as the sky filled with alien ships. The same reptilian who had casually murdered Dr. Lee Min-ho now trembled as plasma fire rained down on his military installations. His personal guard had already fled. His communications were jammed. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he was completely helpless. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from all remaining Vorthan vessels," reported Commander Kim Tae-hyung from the tactical station. "The planetary governor is requesting immediate ceasefire terms." Admiral Park's weathered face showed no emotion. "There are no terms, only consequences." The remaining Vorthan leadership was brought aboard human ships in restraints. Thekvar himself was escorted to Admiral Park's ready room by a squad of Korean Marines. Their leader was Sergeant Lee Ji-woo, Dr. Lee Min-ho's younger sister, who had volunteered specifically for this assignment. Thekvar expected torture or execution. Instead, he found himself sitting across a simple metal table from the human admiral. Park looked tired, older than his years, carrying the weight of decisions that had changed the galaxy forever. "You killed our diplomat," Park said quietly in perfect Vorthan. "A man who spent his life building bridges between species. Do you understand what you have done?" Thekvar's usual arrogance cracked. The reality of his situation was sinking in. His empire was gone. His fleet was destroyed. His people were at the mercy of the species he had called primitive. "I acted according to protocol," he said weakly. "He was interfering with imperial business. He was just another alien, Zhou." "He was the best of us," Park interrupted. "Dr. Lee Min-ho represented everything humanity had worked to become: a healer, a protector, a builder of peace. And in killing him, you forced us to remember what we used to be." The War Crimes Tribunal lasted 3 days. Commander Thekvar and his officers faced charges of genocide, murder, and crimes against civilian populations. The evidence was overwhelming. Dozens of species testified about Vorthan brutality. The Altarian family that Dr. Lee had died protecting gave their testimony through tears. HFY was sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony, forced to help rebuild the worlds his empire had destroyed. His co-conspirators received similar sentences. But for humanity, no punishment could undo what they had become. Captain Yun Saira walked through the ruins of the Vorthan Command Center, watching her soldiers secure the last military installations. Many of these men and women had been teachers, artists and scientists before the activation orders came. Now they moved with the deadly efficiency of professional killers, and she could see the weight of that transformation in their eyes. Corporal Jung Min-sik had been a children's book illustrator on Mars Colony. Now he carried weapons that could vaporize living beings, and had used them dozens of times in the past 6 weeks. The gentle man who drew pictures of cartoon animals had become something else entirely. "Captain," he said, his voice hollow, "the civilian evacuation is complete. All military assets have been secured or destroyed." Saira nodded, but she could see the trauma in his face. The victory was absolute, but the cost to their souls was immeasurable. The Galactic Confederation offered humanity a permanent seat on the Security Council, recognition as a major galactic power, and favorable trade agreements. The other species wanted to honor the humans who had ended the Vorthan threat that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Admiral Park submitted his response 6 months after Dr. Lee's death. The recommendation was unanimous among all human governments: immediate withdrawal from the Galactic Confederation. "We cannot trust ourselves among peaceful species," Park wrote in his final report. "We have remembered who we were before we chose to be better. Until we can find that path again, humanity must remain apart." The decision shocked the galaxy. Species that had feared human military might now beg them to stay. The Altarians, whose refugees Dr. Lee had died protecting, offered to name their new colony world in his honor. The Centauri promised to build monuments to human sacrifice, but humanity had made their choice. They had tasted war again after 3 centuries of peace, and they did not like what they had become. The last human ships departed Confederation space on the 1st anniversary of Dr. Lee Min-ho's death. Earth's final message to the galaxy was simple: we will return when we remember how to be human again. On Earth, in schools across every continent, children learned about the gentle diplomat who had died protecting strangers. They studied the terrible price of his loss and the war that followed. Teachers shared a truth that would guide humanity for generations to come. We are capable of great peace and terrible war. Dr. Lee showed us which one makes us truly human. The galaxy was left to wonder if humanity would ever return, and whether they should hope for it or fear it. In the silence of space where human ships once traveled, other species built memorials to the diplomat whose death had changed everything. Commander HFY spent his remaining years on the prison colony, watching former enemies work together to heal the worlds he had helped destroy. In his final moments, he understood the lesson humanity had tried to teach the galaxy. True strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice to protect. The stars remembered Dr. Lee Min-ho not as a victim, but as a reminder that some things are worth dying for, and that the greatest warriors are those who choose peace.